Hello, my name is Vasilios Kosmakos. I'm with the Summer Proctor History Program with my coworker
Mason Keyser.
This interview is part of the Tidewater Mainstream Project. Who would I have the pleasure of speaking with today?
Randolph Latimore.
Well, hello, Mr. Latimore. If you can just begin by telling us when and where you were born. When and where you were born.
I was born in Norristown, Pennsylvania on October the 26th in 1948.
Fantastic. And who are your parents? What are their names and occupations?
My parents are deceased. My father's name was Horace Douglas Latimore Sr., and my mother's name was Grace Tolson Spence Latimore. And they were domestic workers, both.
And so describe kind of where your family lived, kind of the house you grew up in, that type of thing.
We lived in Saluda, Virginia. Actually, when I was born, my family lived in Norristown, Pennsylvania. But I have no memory of that because we moved from Norristown back to Saluda, which was my father and mother's basically home area. And so I lived there until I left and got married, went off to school and got married.
So tell me a little bit about your, tell me the name of your elementary school, your middle school, and then your high school.
Elementary school was Antioch Elementary. It was right beside Antioch Church in Saluda. Back in those days, as you know, the churches normally would have had a school that served basically the African-American children in that community because of the way segregation was, and we did not have those types of schools like the Caucasians had. Okay, my middle school, there was no such thing as a middle school when I was in school. So at Antioch School, we had grades 1 through 7. And then at St. Clair Walker, which was the high school, we had grades 8 through 12. But at grade 4, Antioch School closed when I was in 4th grade, and we moved to, the students were assigned to different schools, segregated schools still. So I was assigned to Syringa School in Syringa, Virginia, and I stayed there for 2 years, and then I came to what was called the new school, Rappahannock Central, still segregated. And after that, finishing 7th grade there, I went to St. Clair Walker High School for grades 8 through 12.
Fantastic. So did any family members attend St. Clair Walker High School? Who and when?
Oh my, yes. All of us, all of my family. I had...
And actually, before you answer that question, why don't you tell me a little bit about how many siblings you had, that type of thing?
Okay,
yeah.
I have 3 sisters and 4 other brothers.
Oh, wow, wonderful.
So it's 8 siblings. We had a family of 10.
Wow.
Is that right? Yeah, 5. 8, okay. And my oldest brother passed away at a very young age, and my youngest sister is now deceased. Okay, so they all did go to St. Clair Walker High School, but not all finished from St. Clair Walker High School. My youngest brother finished from Middlesex High School because schools had integrated during that period of time.
And would you mind telling me the names of your siblings in order of oldest to youngest?
Okay. Oldest to youngest.
Yeah.
Horace Douglas Latimore Jr. We called him HD or D. Grace Latimore. We call her sister, or people who really know her from back in the day may call her Chi-Chi. Then we have Jean, who is the next oldest. And then there is Patty, who is deceased. Her name is Mary Patricia, I'm sorry. Then we have Edward O'Neill Latimore. You have me, Randolph Latimore. You have John Darnell Latimore, and Charles Anthony Latimore.
So you were towards the younger end of the bunch.
Yes. Okay.
So, and then you said all your siblings went to St. Clair's, right?
Right, but my youngest brother graduated from Middlesex High School because schools integrated here in 1969. I finished in 68. 1970, there was full integration. Prior to that, there was what was called freedom of choice, where you could elect to go to the predominantly white high school. And so none of my brothers or sisters elected to go.
You know, and did you go to St. Clair's? Why did you go to St. Clair's? Was it out of convenience? Why didn't you elect to
There
go
was
to
no other school to go to.
Okay.
That was it. We had one high school in the county for African Americans. And at that time, one high school in the county for Caucasians.
And then you just mentioned the ability to elect your high school.
Would you repeat that?
You just mentioned the ability to elect going to a white high school, correct? You just mentioned how like a African American could elect to go to their high school.
Freedom of choice. Yes.
Freedom of choice. Was that an option when you were going to high school? And if so, why didn't you go to the white high school? Was it out of convenience or what was your rationale behind that?
I think that came around 1965, 66, somewhere around there. And the reason I did not elect to go to a white high school because it did not interest me at the time.
And then, so speaking a little bit more about St. Clair's, what are your earliest earliest memories of St. Clair? So, like freshman year or seventh grade, you know, what did you do? How was it like? You know, any feelings?
It was, in my opinion, it was a great school. It was a community school. When I think of the school and the teachers that were there, they knew us. We could relate to them and with them. And they normally had a very good relationship with our parents. Even if we did something wrong, you know, the relationship and respect was there, not like it is today. So I have very good memories of St. Clair Walker. I think they provided me with the skill set to be the person I am today.
So elaborate a little bit more on that. Is there a specific incident of a teacher that really stands out? Is any formative kind of like, was it any formative teachers that you kind of really ring a bell when you think about it?
At St. Clair Walker?
Yeah, yes, sir. Any really specific or any specific incident?
Mrs. Easter Duster Holmes comes to mind. She was basically a motherly, matronly person who just could make you fall in line, and she would put you under her wing and nurture you and just move you forward. There was teachers, and this is not at the high school, but in my elementary years, there was Ms. Thelma Ferguson, who's now deceased, and Ms. Teresa Harris, who taught me at Antioch School, and that's where I learned how to read and write and my multiplication tables. And at Syringa School, there was Mrs. Wilma Powell, who was a very stern, no-nonsense person, but she was really good as a teacher. She was fantastic. And then I had Mrs. Gladys Cawthorne White, at Syringa School. Now back to St. Clair Walker. Who else was there? Mr. Charles I. Thurston was the principal, and he knew my family. My family knew him, and we got along fantastic, even though I was not an angel in school, but we got along fantastically, and he just also helped to make me the person I am today.
And describe the atmosphere of St. Clair a little bit more. So it's like Was it kind of more of a rough school? Was it kind of more, were people more or less, kind of proper? I mean, like, kind of describe
Well, you have to remember the community
Yeah.
that we were in at the time. Families knew each other, and you didn't bring a lot of stuff to school like kids do now. Of course, we didn't have social media aspect by any means, but the school was homey for the most part. We had maybe an altercation every now and then, but nothing drastic like today. I guess back in the day, when things like that happened, it was drastic for them, for us back in the day. But in today's terms, it was not. So I can't think of any really, really bad situations that occurred at St. Clair Walker.
And discuss kind of like the class size, what type of thing?
Class size?
Larger, smaller?
I would say they were average. Now, well, Randolph, what do you mean by average? Back then, I would say, depending on the class, we would have maybe 20, 25 children in a class. And this is at the high school now. Now, in some of the more advanced math classes or the foreign language classes, you would have fewer students who elected to take those, so therefore those classes would be smaller.
And describe kind of the type of classes that were offered. So you just mentioned there was advanced language, like was it Spanish, was it Latin, was it Greek?
We had one foreign language, that was French. We had two French teachers, Mrs. Carmen Thurston and Ms. Rebecca Cameron. They also taught students English. We had, of course, the basic history classes, the geography classes, general math classes. We had biology, chemistry, business classes, typing. We had those manual typewriters, and when we finally got we had to learn the home row keys. I can see them right now. When we finally got the electric typewriters, we thought we had died and gone to heaven. Everybody wanted to be assigned one, but that wasn't the case. And we had, I think I said the general math and the advanced math classes. And we had the agriculture classes, I'm sorry. We had what we call SPOHP. Woodworking, brick masonry. We dabbled maybe a little bit in electrical wiring, but the basic was woodworking and masonry and just general information about ag stuff. Yeah. And
so discuss that more. Was that did most people take those kind of agricultural-based classes? This community seems to be kind of farming, fishing oriented, right?
I don't recall if ag was an elective. I want to say maybe yes. I'm not sure because we had home economics too. Mrs. Alma Jones was the home economics teacher, and so I'm not sure if that was an elective or not. But I took the ag classes as well.
So, kind of, discussing your personal experience a little bit more deliberately. What was your what was your favorite class? You got your PhD in what was it? I'm sorry, environmental educational leadership. Mm-hmm. So were you always kind of drawn to that type of stuff, even from in high school? Or?
No.
What was your favorite class?
Actually, I wanted to be a horticulturist.
Oh wow!
But for an African American person during that era, I felt it was difficult. It would be difficult to find a job. So I moved into an area that I felt I could make a living.
Which was?
Education.
Oh, education, yeah. Mm-hmm. So did you? So before you got your PhD, did we?
It's a Doctor of Education,
I'm sorry.
EDD.
Okay, doctor. Okay. So after high school, did you simply go straight into your bachelor's, and then like how did that work?
Okay, so after high school, I went to Virginia State University. Didn't know how I was going to get there or how I was going to make it all work. My parents could not afford to send me. So I went there, worked. The first year, went to classes and got out of classes and worked after that. And my second year, I got married. My wife was my high school sweetheart.
Oh, wow.
And she was at Virginia Union University. So we got married. We lived in Richmond. I took a reduced schedule at Virginia State College at that time, and started working full-time at Philip Morris. And I would catch a bus from Richmond to Petersburg every day to go to class, and my wife was at Union. She would leave work, school, and catch a bus down to then Miller and Rhodes, and she was working in the evenings after class down there. And we did that for several years. So it took me 5 years to finish from Virginia State. And then I started working in January of 1973 as an educator officially. And in 86, I think it was 86, I'm not sure of the dates, I got my master's degree from Virginia Commonwealth University. Or maybe it was 96. I'm not sure of those dates now. And then I went back and got my doctorate in education from Virginia Tech. Yeah.
So you mentioned your wife was your high school sweetheart. Kind of, let's kind of discuss the social kind of atmosphere there a little bit more, right? Was there a lot of dating? I mean, like, tell me about that a little bit more. How'd you meet your wife? Was there a prom? We can talk about that.
No, I can't tell you everything.
Fair enough. Some information personal, right? I get that.
We met in high school, yes, because we went to different elementary schools, of course, because she lived on the northern end of the county, and I lived in the middle of the county. So the kids who lived in the northern end of the county went to the elementary schools up there. And once we got into high school, that's when we got to know each other, and the rest is history.
So in school, I mean, kind of discuss your social life a little bit more. Did you have a lot of friends? I mean, like...
I'm not going to say I had a lot of friends when I was in school. I didn't have a lot of non-friends either.
Yeah.
I was president of the Student Council Association. I was someone that individuals would come to for information. Teachers would assign me different things to do because I seemed to have given off an air that I was responsible and I could get things done, and I could get other students to follow along and do what needed to be done. So.
What other extracurricular activities were you involved with?
I am non-athletic. The closest I came to athletics was a statistician for the basketball team and the baseball team. We did not have a football team. That was at the white schools at that time. We just didn't have the money for the equipment.
And what other types of activities were available?
We had the FFA, Future Farmers of America. The girls who would be involved with home economics had the FHA, Future Homemakers of America. We had the Student Council Association. We had the Honor Society. We had the Library Club. We had band.
Were there any sorts of like celebrations or kind of events the school put on that kind of stick out?
We had proms. That was a big event each year. We started having a talent show towards the end when I was, I guess, 11th, 10th grade or something like that. We would have a talent show at the school. And that's basically it.
How about May Day? Was that a big thing the school put on?
Not at St. Clair Walker, but when I was in elementary school at Antioch School, we would have May Day, and at Syringa School, we would have a May Day.
And
Yes.
why not St. Clair Walker?
I guess because it was a high school, and I think the May Day was more so reserved for elementary.
And then, so describe, so one, excuse me, 1 second. So describe lunchtime a little bit more.
Describe what?
Lunchtime.
Lunchtime. Oh, lunchtime.
That must be a fun.
We had
every day, right?
well, we didn't have the lunch program like we have now back then in the 60s. So we had, I don't think we did. No.
Did you bring
But in the high school, you could go to the cafeteria. You would go over to the cafeteria. It was an external building that was connected, and it's still in existence, and it was connected to the shop area. And we had home-cooked meals.
Oh, wow.
It was amazing. We didn't have the USDA restrictions of what's going into a school lunch program. Back in the day, it was, I can see the cooks right now cooking that food. And during World Series time, there would be a television in the cafeteria, basically for the teachers to look at the World Series. It was non-air conditioned, of course. None of the buildings were air conditioned back then, and it was a good time. You could buy ice cream, ice cream box there, and.
How about the type of food? Was it kind of just like you said? It was kind of more home style, right?
Yeah, you would have meatloaf, mashed potatoes, gravy, cabbage, old-fashioned cooked cabbage, green beans, but all the seasoning in it that they say now is not good for you. Homemade biscuits, homemade rolls.
That sounds a hell of a lot better than anything I
I mean, it was good food.
Wow.
It was good. Now that was only in the
High school.
High school. When I was in elementary school, we carried our lunch to school, and we didn't have indoor bathrooms in elementary school. No, we had to go outside to use the bathroom in an outhouse, and we didn't have running water in this Antioch school. And that school is still standing, but it is used for another purpose today. At Syringa School, I do not recall indoor bathrooms either, or water fountains, or things like that at Syringa School. But I know at Antioch, I know we did not have that there. Yeah.
So you mentioned the World Series being played during lunchtime, you said?
Oh, yeah.
So was that so I would imagine that was kind of a big deal then, right? Or, like at least when that was happening, everybody in the school was excited.
I wouldn't say everybody in the school was excited. I would say the teachers were excited.
Okay.
Yeah.
What other kind of days throughout the year kind of really stood out? So, any celebrations, any kind of was it exam day, what kind of really sticks out, anything special? Or not really?
No, graduation, baccalaureate, that was it. that stood out to me. I mean, yeah.
How about kind of give me a rough outline of how the year went by, right? So, did you have exams every so often? Did you get a report card? Finals. I mean.
Yeah, we had 6 weeks exams. Got a report card to take home at the end of the 6 weeks. You had midterm exams. Then you start second semester. And you didn't switch classes at the end of the semester. They were not semester-long classes, they were year-long classes.
Okay.
Yeah, and you had, after the first semester, you start the same routine over with 6 weeks exams until you get to June, and then you have your final exam. And pop quizzes, of course, and stuff like that.
I would imagine, exam time is always kind of a stressful kind of time of the year. Kind of discuss kind of your experience of that.
They weren't stressful for me.
Yeah, you were a good student.
Well, I don't know if I was a good student, but I didn't fail anything. So exam times really didn't stress me out.
So what type of regional news do you remember hearing while you were in school? How were these events discussed?
This was national news. You said regional, but I can't think of regional. The most profound news that I heard in high school was the assassination of Dr. King.
Oh, wow.
And I remember that vividly. Mr. Thurston came on the intercom and made the announcement that that Dr. King had been shot. And I was in the hallway.
How old were you?
There. How old was I?
Yeah.
17.
Oh, wow, okay. So you were...
Because he was, 16 or 17 then, at that time. And we had a program. The school came together in the auditorium there, and we had a program about it.
So you said you were in the hallway, and then...
Yeah, and the intercom came on, and we knew something was up because you didn't normally make announcements during the day unless something really important had happened. And I don't remember the exact words that were said, but it was the announcement that Martin Luther King had passed away.
And then you said that the school did a program or something?
There was some type of program that we had in the auditorium, and I don't remember the context of it, to be honest with you.
How did people generally react? I mean, like...
In disbelief.
Yeah.
In anger, and just disbelief.
I mean, I would imagine, that's probably what people talked about for a couple of days, weeks, months. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember any specific conversations you had with your friends about it? Anything you maybe...
I do not. I do not.
That? Yeah.
No, I do not. And I remember the atmosphere in the school when Robert Kennedy was assassinated. It was solemn, scary time for African Americans in the school because we didn't know what was coming next. Kind of like what it is today.
Just to provide the audience a little more context, what do you mean by that? So, like, obviously, major civil rights leader got assassinated, Robert Kennedy, obviously now went to the black community. What were you scared that was going to happen? What were you scared that was going to happen?
We did not know from a national level perspective what is going to be the next incident to occur that will try to hold progress back for African Americans because of the stance of those two individuals that I just mentioned. And from a local level, we were in the midst of change, okay? Because you have to understand that we were moving towards integration, and the parents of children who, under freedom of choice, elected to go to Middlesex High School, if those parents were employed by whites, normally they lost their jobs.
Wow.
Yes. And they had to seek employment elsewhere, which made things difficult, or they could not find employment at all. And we did have one or two instances, when students went to Middlesex High School, at least, I don't want to misstate anything. I know at least one person came back from Middlesex High School because of the tension that was there during integration, during freedom of choice, I'm sorry.
Did you know anybody personally that kind of did that?
Yes.
So can you discuss that a little bit more? So like, personally, like, kind of,
I don't feel comfortable in mentioning any names because I have not asked the person if I could use
of course, yeah,
the name.
But when he came back, I mean, it's like, or maybe a better question is, let's discuss the context of that a little bit more. So it's like, you mentioned how tense it was. Mm-hmm. Were you ever scared that there's going to be an attack of some sort on the school, or any attack on the kind of larger community?
Not on the school. And within the community, I was never scared of an attack of any sort. But my encounters with Caucasians during that period of time was extremely limited, because I never went to school with Caucasians until I started college. And my only encounter during that period of time was with teachers. I had one white teacher at St. Clair Walker,
wow.
Mr. Shepard. And that was it until I got to college.
I mean, after school, I mean, the black community kind of just stayed to themselves, and the white community kind of just stayed to themselves.
Correct.
There wasn't really too much interaction.
Correct.
Mixing. Interesting.
Yeah. Correct. There was very little interaction.
When you kind of reflect on that, I mean, I get maybe how does that make you feel?
Well, it doesn't make me feel good.
Yeah.
Because when I see my children and how they have friends across racial lines, that they can go back to elementary school and middle school, high school, and they still have connections. My connections across those racial lines are extremely limited because I have no connections from elementary, middle, high school. And the connections I made in college, either at VSU, which was VSC at the time, Virginia State College, and then at VCU and at Virginia Tech, we're off doing our thing. So we have no real connections even today.
Do you have any questions?
I do. This is Mason Keyser. If we could go back a little bit, you mentioned that you were born in Norristown, Pennsylvania?
Norristown, Pennsylvania.
Where is that in Pennsylvania? Or do you remember what your parents were doing up there?
When we left Norristown, I was maybe 3 years old. Mm-hmm. They were working. I don't. I know my father was working.
Yeah.
Had
they been there for a while? up in Norristown?
I would say yes, because my brother's sister, Jean, yeah, I think they had been there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because all of them were, everybody was born, was born. I don't recall them being here in Virginia and then moving. I have no memory of that.
Maybe if we could then flash back to 1968. That's when
Okay.
King was shot and RFK was shot then. And do you remember like hearing, like watching the news or hearing on the radio about all there's a lot of unrest in, I think, Baltimore, DC. Like
Yes.
was that just kind of like watching each city across the U.S. go?
Yes.
Yeah. What was that like? What did y'all talk about that?
I don't recall talking about it in school. I really don't. It seems as though we went on with what we had to do. There was no, I do not recall any rally here in the county by the NAACP or any civic group at that time. I don't have any memory of that.
And 68 was an election year too,
Yes.
right? And so you were talking about y'all worried about progress being halted or at least slowed down. So I think Goldwater was running for the Democrat, and then Nixon was the community pretty political, and like we're going to talk about who we want to vote for to keep progress going. Were you guys thinking of the national level in that way?
Well, as a 16, 17, 18-year-old, I can almost say no, we were not thinking in terms of that. But I think I can say that the adults were thinking in terms of that. And of course, for the most part, to look at the Democratic Party in regards to continuing progress forward.
Prior to Lyndon Johnson and JFK, how was the Democratic Party, if you can like think about it, how was it seen differently before the 60s versus by 1968?
Did it seem differently? I'm trying to remember who the president was then. We had Eisenhower, who was a Republican. No. I don't recall the differences there. I don't. Maybe I'm not understanding your question.
Well, yeah, so was there any political party that seemed more apt to support the progress, to support greater equality for African Americans in the country? I feel like the Democratic Party before the 1960s was more apt to limit that, because Harry Rick Byrd, the senator for Virginia, was very much against integration and everything. And so, but nowadays, I feel like most people would, they see the Democrats as being more apt to support that. So I wonder if you noticed a shift over the course of your life.
Over the course of my life.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be 75 in October. So, from my memory, I can say that the Democratic Party, from my memory, is more on the road of providing equity across races, as well as equality, measures of equality. Which is different from what happened during the period when the Republicans were in charge during the period of the Civil War and afterwards, because the Republicans during that time were the ones who were more progressive and moving equality and equity forward, and the Democrats were the ones who were against ending or making the South relinquish the slave situation.
You mind if I ask one more question? Sure. I'm sorry about bouncing around like this. You mentioned when you were in elementary school, y'all didn't have running water in the building,
Right.
nor AC.
Right.
I reckon you must have gotten real thirsty during the day. So how did you, if you need to get a drink?
We had a well there, and we had, what did we have to get water out of? It must have been a bucket, I guess. It must have been.
Was the well open, or did you have to like kind of pump that out, or did you just lower the bucket into the well? Or?
Yeah, was it a crank?
I think it was a bucket. I think. I'm trying to remember Antioch. I know where the outhouse was. I have vivid memories of that. But yeah. That's as far as I can go with that one.
So we'll kind of close the interview by talking a little bit about Cook's Corner. What are your earliest memories of Cook's Corner, or hearing about Cook's Corner?
Would you repeat that, please?
What are your earliest memories of Cook's Corner, or of hearing about Cook's Corner?
Okay, Cook's Corner was a kind of a hub for socialization for African Americans. We had G.L. Davis, who had a service station there, and he had a beer joint there. And then we had Mrs. Frances Jackson's place, which was across from Lynn Davis's place. That was not, they kind of sold the same things, but it was on a smaller scale. And then we had, there was a Tasty Freeze that was run by the Champions. It wasn't open for a long period of time, but it existed maybe a couple of years, I guess. And then we had a little barber shop there. It was in a pink building. It was just a lot of activity. It was at the crossroads there in the intersection, and people would stop. On Friday nights, Saturday nights, it was a hopping place.
And how did the businesses change over time? So, for example, do you remember Herman's, Buller's Outdoors Movie, Buller Harris's Outdoor Movie, the baseball field, the ice cream parlor, the restaurant, juke joint, that type of thing?
I remember Herman Wakes. I used to go there and dance. They had great bands that would come in, and it was just a swinging place on Saturday nights.
And I'm sorry, when you would go to these places, were you in high school? Or were you
High school.
Oh, high school. Okay, so
Yes.
Younger crowd then.
Pardon me?
It was more of a younger crowd.
Yes.
Okay.
More of a younger crowd. And I don't recall, well, there was a ball field there at Cook's Corner, but I don't recall ever going to a ball game there. And you mentioned some other places?
Yeah, the ice cream parlor and the restaurant and juke joint.
Well, the ice cream parlor is the one I was talking about, was the Champions.
Okay.
Yeah, I called it a Tasty Freeze, but it was
Okay.
that was it. I remember that vividly. Yeah.
And tell me more about that then. So it seems like you have good memories associated with that.
Well, I was a kid, you know, and I could either ride my bike down the road, because we lived our house was about a mile from Cook's Corner. I could either walk down there or ride my bike down there and hang out down there. You could get some ice cream, hamburgers, French fries, stuff like that.
Nice. So it's kind of almost like a old school, kind of just like almost like an old school diner. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I don't recall being able to go in to sit down. I remember going to the window. I just don't think it was a eat-in place. I may be wrong though.
Tell me more about some of the memories you have associated with that place, right? So imagine as a young kid, right? You go get the ice cream, you know, probably Friday night, you're probably excited. Maybe some friends.
No, I didn't go there on Friday nights.
Oh, no?
No.
Well.
You have to remember, wherever I had to go during that period of time, I either walked or I rode a bicycle. So my nighttime adventures were limited, you know. And my only walking time coming home at night sometimes was coming home from the dance at Herman Wake's. And that was it. So I can't tell you anything about the nightlife there. I can tell you at Cook's Corner at G.L. Davis's place, the juke joint, as you would, I think you called it, they would sell beer, and we were young then, and we were too young to buy beer. But of course, we wanted it. So we would get somebody older to go in, and they would buy it for us, and they'd bring it out, and everybody knew what was going on. But, you know, but it was all in good fun. Yeah.
Now, this is Mason Geezer. At these dances y'all went to, did y'all have local bands playing?
Yes.
What kind of music did they play?
Oh, the latest. I can hear it right now.
Was it electric, like kind of like rock and roll, or did you play older stuff before that?
Older stuff. Well, what you call older stuff now is what we were into back then.
No, I ain't into it. I was wondering if you guys played any like, I don't know, like
40s, 50s,
like jazz, bebop, anything like fast like that.
Oh yes, yeah. We had the Donatones. We had, I forget the names of the bands, but they could play the saxophones, the trumpets, the
a lot of horns,
guitars, the drums. I mean, they could play, and we could dance.
Did you play anything?
No.
No.
I danced.
You danced?
Yes. I love to dance, even to today. I love to dance.
I don't have, unless you have anything more to add, Mason.
No.
Well, I guess we'll end the interview by asking you if there's anything else you wish to share.
I don't think so. No.
All right. Well, that concludes the interview. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.